I put my family, as bad as it sounds, for the sake of humanity, on the back burner. Carbohydrates are not an essential part of our diet. You don't need it to build the body, to sustain the body.
So if we desire this happiness, we're making carbohydrates, in essence, our God.
Yeah.
And the very idea that carbohydrates are tied to all of these other addictions is fascinating. So I always did, I think I did this last time. I have so much respect for you that I have a hard time, despite building a friendship with you, and you're very humble, so you're like, just call me Sean. Okay. I have a hard time doing that when we're on the show, because you're sitting here now as this guy who has really transformed so much of my life that title doctor needs to be there. But I know you prefer Sean for those reasons of humility, so I'm going to go with that, but I have to put that disclosure out there.
Yeah.
So it has been a year since we saw each other in person. I flew up to Minneapolis, and I went through your program, and I just have to start by saying I'm about to share some really cool things with the audience, and we're about to know more. But before we do that, even though people know who you are, there's always a new audience, and they need to know a little more. So, Sean, tell us a little bit about how you got to this place right here and what that journey was, and then I want to talk a little bit about what you've been doing for the past year.
Yeah, so I've had an interesting life, an interesting journey, and I know we don't want to do a show about my life, but it does reflect, the path and the journey I've been on to bring me to this state that I am. So I grew up in a normal family, low income, middle income, Washington, D.C., went to public schools. I attended a community college for 2 years, worked hard, got good grades, ended up getting an inspirational college. Really, he was not even a professor, he was an instructor. Got me excited about reading and learning for the first time. So my mind opened up to studying, got good enough grades to...
What do you remember what triggered that? Like, what did you read that?
It's a really good question, and you're a leader and you ask that question. So what opened up young Sean O'Mara's mind? I was 18 years old. I'd been through high school, was forced to read books. And this time he said, this college instructor, who, by the way, was a humble, hardworking police sergeant with Arlington County Police Department outside Washington, D.C. And he said, look, I like to write and I like to read. And he says, I'm going to open up the first 5 minutes of this class with just reading the best writers in the world that I have found, that I learned about, the classics. He goes, I don't care if you listen or not, but he said, please don't make any noise. So anybody else who's in here who wants to listen can do that. And so this was a criminal justice class, Criminal Justice 101. It's the first class in law enforcement for people who want to be a police officer. So there I am, have no intention to really do anything particularly erudite or serious in academia. I just wanted to get out and be a police officer. And so I listened for 5 minutes while I'd read this, and somewhere along the way, in that first, I'd say month and a half, taking that particular class, my mind became attracted to words that were spoken, that were written by great men and women that had reflected on life and had put it into the classics, and it opened up even, my hairs are standing up. It has been 50 years or so since that particular class, but my mind opened up, and I got excited about learning and the concept of knowledge, and I studied very hard from that point on, and to this day, he was the single most influential teacher I've ever had in my life. I subsequently went on to Penn State. I got scholarships to go to a bigger state university. Did well enough in State University to graduate high honors. I applied to and got accepted to Villanova University School of Law. I worked before I went to law school as a police officer while in college. And for a year after college, I worked as an undercover narcotics agent. And that taught me a lot about life, a lot about humanity, addiction, the grip of darkness that can beset people. And it was a very interesting job. Not a lot of people get to do undercover narcotics work, but it was very interesting. It was important for my development. And then I went to law school, became a criminal prosecutor right after I graduated from law school, and worked for about 3 years as a criminal prosecutor, and became frustrated, with politics. It wasn't so much money when it comes to how we choose who to prosecute and how we prosecute things. And I know a lot of people are aware of this concept of lawfare, but I did see it, and I was in a conservative Republican prosecutor's office, and I saw it being applied not so much racially, but economically. If you were not connected, did not have money, you used a public defender, the book was thrown at you. But if you were connected and you knew somebody that had made a political donation, this was Pennsylvania, if you knew somebody that made a political contribution to either a judge, the public defender, or the district attorney, you were treated differently because you were part of that, kind of the hack system, the political system, and we would deal down with you because you were helping the influencers. And I didn't agree with that. I wanted to prosecute people based on the merits of their lives, not other people that they were connected to. And so I wasn't a team player in the prosecutor's office because I like to do my prosecutions apart from the influence from above. Meaning in my office, I followed the influence way above that. I followed my faith, and I got pushed out. Well, it wasn't I got pushed out. It's just I was told I'm never getting promoted. And so I got frustrated. I left my practice of law, became increasingly more interested in science. I'd always wanted to be a physician when I was younger. I didn't think I was smart enough. Subsequently.
If I just may stop there. That's hilarious. You didn't think you were smart enough, so you went into law.
Yeah, it was. I worked my way into law school. It's something that lawyers. I think I worked harder in law school, but when it came to medical school, it was more difficult. The concepts were more challenging, and so I left my practice of law. I applied to get a military scholarship through the U.S. Army to attend medical school. I worked, and I don't mind telling you, when I left the practice of law, I took off my suits, Dave, and I put on jeans and a sweatshirt, went back to college. And during that 2-year period of time, I worked as a night watchman, a security
guard. Give us a age that you're at this point.
At that point, I was about 28 years old.
Okay.
I was what was called then a post-baccalaureate. I'd studied criminal justice. I went to law school. I didn't have the sciences that I needed to attend medical school. So I worked as a night watchman, security guard, wearing a polyester uniform. Even though I had been a police officer, undercover drug agent, and a trial attorney for a prosecutor's office, district attorney's office, I humbled myself because I said, look, if I want to go to medical school, I've got to be singularly focused on that objective and not trying to serve two masters, one where I had my foot in the door, trying to maintain this career in law. I walked completely away from law, took my classes that I needed at a baccalaureate level at Villanova University again. I got straight A's because I studied all night long for, I think, $7 an hour. And then I got a scholarship once I was accepted to medical school to the medical school of my choice. And I finished medical school after 4 years, absolutely loved the study of medicine. And it has always been a fascinating profession I was involved in. But what happened was I ran up against the standard American diet. I was then about 34 years of age when I finished medical school, married my wife, and entered military service. And I gradually started to put on weight and became.
And so you're like mid-30s, late 30s?
Yeah, about 34. From probably about the age of 32 to 34, I started to decline in my health. And then from 34 to 48, I really declined in my health. I experienced an enlarging prostate. By the time I was 48, I was waking up 5 times a night. I had degenerative joint disease. All my joints, my knees hurt. I didn't occasionally limp, Dave. I limped all the time. I had a permanent limp from knee discomfort, shoulder discomfort, back discomfort, bent over. I looked probably 10 years older than my age, my stated age. And my life was falling apart. I had severe gastroesophageal reflux disease, which is heartburn.
I think of all those things. I just don't know what, or, now, by the way, just important, had, until I met you, all those things, I just didn't know what to call them.
Yeah. Yeah. They were just aches and pains and disease that starts accumulating. So the bottom line is, I had erectile dysfunction too. I was like everybody else. And then I met another human being that told me, stop eating processed foods, start sprinting outdoors, get some sunshine, eat fermented foods, and do some fasting. So I did these basic things, and almost nobody does all those things at once.
Yeah, this is, by the way, your story. I think when most people hear this, if they don't understand your level of qualification, and by the way, I'll say too, not just medically. I mean, and we'll get into that even more, like what happened when you experienced all these things and the transitions that you had there. But like just kind of pulling back here to that, you keyed on that narcotics thing, that view that you had into life. The way that plays in what you're doing now, and just understanding that people get trapped in these certain things and they think they need something that they don't need and they can't free themselves from it. Well, that's a pretty deep thing when you're talking about drugs, but you're talking about other aspects of life. And the number one drug 100%. In the world right now is carbohydrates. So we can get into that.
Yeah.
But that human nature aspect makes you, I think, better as a physician. Not to mention the fact that you have this like just insight into law. So you've exercised your brain on so many different things. But what I also love about this is that you had to be the patient before you were the doctor on what it is you treat.
Right.
I think that gives you an insight that's pretty fantastic.
It really does. And physicians are patients because they're not protected. They don't get a special pass from disease. Yeah. If they're not living correctly and haven't learned to live correctly, and by the way, the point of all my experience is really looking back is that I never learned how to live correctly in medical school. It's not something that's taught. What you learn are tools to treat disease from which the system will benefit and exploit the progression and the tolerance of disease. And really, that's how I describe. I think the medical system tolerates disease and exploits disease instead of hating disease and eradicating it. And I think if we had a mindset to redesign and rethink how medical school curriculum is, and perhaps with the advent of a pretty disruptive-minded Secretary of Health, Secretary Kennedy, I think that could happen. And I think we have to be bold and ambitious and really change the curriculum. So when I met this young man and I started to do these things, all of my symptoms, he did not tell me that this was going to help any of those symptoms. Mm-hmm. All he told me is, well, if you don't want to be fat anymore and you want to, look better, he said, do those things, sprint, use a sauna, get in the, sunshine, do some fasting and cut out processed foods and carbohydrates. So I started doing those things just to lose weight. And then about
How much did you lose?
I probably numerically didn't lose a huge amount of change in numbers because the sprinting and I started to work out more. I started building, muscle. And so I was building muscle at the same time I was losing this fat. So the delta on the bathroom scale, the change in that number wasn't that big. But what shocked me was the fact that all my symptoms went away. My disease went away. I'm standing in the bathroom, suddenly peeing like I used to when I was a teenager. It was loud. It was impressive. It was the way I used to, pee when I was a younger man, vigorous, instead of the dribble. And I'll look at you in the eye, and I will look at the audience and say, I was that guy that would go to the bathroom and then reach down to the roll of toilet paper and grab a bunch of it and put it in my underwear because it leaked out for a long time afterwards. Do you think I felt like a good man? I didn't. And from there, I went to being this much healthier guy, went completely away. I was no longer waking up 5 times a night. And it was from, no expectation. This wasn't placebo. Mm-hmm. Nobody told me do these things and that were correct. And so when it happened, I was confronted with trying to explain it from a scientific perspective as a physician. How did these diseases, my erectile dysfunction left me, my enlarged prostate corrected, I started peeing again like a normal teenager. My limp went away. I started, sprinting faster, more vigorously. I was sleeping better. I had more energy. And my precancerous lesions that necessitated me to have a scoping procedure every 3 months to biopsy the tissues in my esophagus to look for cancer, which was the natural progression of Barrett's esophagus, that completely was cured. My epithelial cells went to completely normal, healthy tissue with those simple changes. And I was as mad as I could be at the fact that none of it came from medical school. It all came from this young guy that had learned about it and really was kind of an ancestral kind of approach to how we should be living. So with that kind of an experience and no science or no conventional medical curriculum that taught me that, I decided that it demanded my serious attention as a researcher. So for the next 7 years, I joined a research practice where, Dave, I've volunteered full time from 4 a.m. to 7 p.m., and I never took a penny. I had 5 kids. I had to work part-time in an urgent care practice to be able to buy them Catholic school uniforms, to be able to buy them, food and to cover the rent. So I put my family, as bad as it sounds, for the sake of humanity, on the back burner. And I volunteered full-time, never taking a penny. So if anybody doubts the authenticity of my motivation, it's because of what happened to me. I wanted to take it and to help out other people. So my research partner joined me in the same kind of dedication, Dr. C.J. Zhang. He volunteered full-time as well. And we studied these dangerous areas of fat around the heart, fat in the abdomen, and fat in the muscle for the purposes of trying to use those as targets to eliminate disease, because we saw with individuals that we successfully targeted that fat and eliminated it, that their areas of chronic disease, which I had and that you had, were eliminated as that fat was eliminated from the body. And so that kind of sums up my past, probably 10 years or so. And since that time now, I work with individuals that are interested, and mostly, to be candid, I look for a personality, somebody that has taken an organization, built it up, and has a dedication to want to improve that organization. They know the metrics, KPI, key performance indicators. They have a practice of taking measurements and improving it. And also they have a mindset where they say, you know what? I'm not going to accept suboptimal existence, poor performance. I'm not going to accept average. I started this business to be, for it to be a great business and to excel and to be successful. And that mindset lends itself very usefully to help to take them and use the same kind of principles to improve their body. So I say, like I said to you, Dave, you have been very successful in the business world. We're going to take those skill sets and now give you the strategies you need where you have been failing in your personal life biologically. We're going to make you a winner. Mm-hmm. And that's what I do with people. So often it's the case that it's business owners that come to me that get the best results, or people that are high performers, people that want to do and have done well in life and want to continue to do good. And I'm really excited about the future of this. I think for the first time we're seeing disease being eliminated in individuals. And so what I'd like to do is I want to be disruptive minded, like the other business leaders that have come with interesting concepts. I've disrupted conventional business in one avenue or the other. I want to do that in healthcare. Mm-hmm. I want to challenge this notion that disease should be tolerated, that disease should be exploited, and I want to target it. I want to develop a model that compensates the most effective women and men that are eradicating disease, rewards them with commercial viability so that practice gets out there, because in the absence of it being viable, it being successful, it's just a charity. And you're not going to change the world with a charity. And so business, the world, the wheels of commerce enable the delivery of service that improves the lives of humans. And it's what's missing in healthcare. We need to have that improvement in the lives. And so I reached out to you. I found your profile. I saw you on Relevant Radio and LinkedIn, and I said, I feel attracted to Dave. I think he would understand this. And I called you up, and that led to our conversation over a year ago, and look at you now.
Well, this is great because I can't wait to tell our viewers what I went through because of your help. So we're going to get into that in a minute. But I just so many other comments on this. One of the things that I think is brilliant about what you say is you're just not afraid to call obesity the disease. I mean, I think that, in today's, what was there? Somebody just recently hired that was like, a body shape, like a affirmation person from one of the government people. And so they affirm people that are obese.
Yeah.
That's like affirming cardiac arrest.
Yeah.
It's a ridiculous thing. But the other thing too is you think about why this happens. Of course, when you have the pharmaceutical companies paying for the medical schools, they're going to have a certain interest in what they do if they want to keep the funding and what they're going to teach.
Driving the curriculum.
Yeah. And then not only are they driving the curriculum, but if you think about this, there's a certain amount of humility. And I think once people know more about this, they realize the need that they actually have for the importance of the consultation from a physician. But the idea that you can prescribe something requires that you can prescribe, okay? But you prescribe, don't eat that.
Right.
You don't have to have a medical degree to prescribe that. And I think that takes away that kind of like power that a lot of physicians feel like they need to have because their magic goes away when they just really give great advice.
Right.
But the patient doesn't care. They just want to be healthy.
They want results.
They want results. And so, I mean, there's just so many key elements to this and this kind of like fight. Now, one other thing too, just talking about like the CEOs or the executives that are good for you. I'm sure that there are some of them that just got so caught up in their work, they neglected their bodies, but they knew it was important. But they're like, I got to sell my company first. I got to get to the exit, and then I can take care of my health. For some people, they never make it that far, unfortunately.
They don't.
And either by way of death or they don't make it to the exit, and so they don't get to that. But the other thing that's interesting, though, is that I would be a different case. I would be a case of a person who was disciplined and thought he was doing everything right. And that's really what I'm trying to tell people now. It's like I did cardiovascular work. I ate lean, okay? I ate a lot of small meals a day. I followed kind of all of these prescribed things that people talked about. I ignored things like, sure, I'll have mouthwash and fluoride, and it doesn't matter if I eat this or I eat that, and all things reasonable. And by the way, I'm not the perfect disciple or patient of Dr. Sean. There's a few things still on my list that I know he would criticize, and maybe I would have accelerated my progress. But I do want to come back to something. I want to show you something that took place this morning. And my wife will attest to this, that a year ago when we met, I was in so much pain. I needed to get my hip replaced. I don't know how they actually technically medically grade it, but I have osteoarthritis in my hip that on a scale of 1 to 10 teetered between a 5 and a 6 by way of like the description of pain. I don't know if they, like with cancer stage this or that, but I couldn't touch my toes. I was in 3 or 4 pain all day. That's just enough to grimace, by the way, a 3 or 4. By the nighttime, every night, it was an 8, and I just needed it to go away. It was so bad. And I couldn't walk for very long. And so I'm actually in the physician's office, the surgeon's office, having my consultation to schedule. I'd already seen him once. Now I'm there to say, okay, we're going to do this surgery, a hip replacement. And I also had my ortho tell me I needed my knees replaced and my shoulder replaced. His exact quote was, "You have the shoulder of an 85-year-old. And I said, "You mean like metaphorically, right?" And he goes, in fact, this is Dr. Padramos. Do you know Dr. Padramos?
I don't.
Down here in Naples. He's
no,
one of the...
I haven't met him yet. But
he's one of the most renowned... He wasn't ortho, but now he does, PRP and stem cells and all that kind of stuff. But so he's... And I said, well, you mean that metaphorically? Like, it's like my shoulder's old. And he goes, no, I mean, when I have 85-year-olds come in, your shoulder's worse than them. And he said, but the thing that's more than 85 is your hip. This is in bad shape. And... So the pain was just creeping up. My Achilles everything was bad. Like I couldn't. So last year I go to your facility and you do all the scans. And a part of this is a bunch of tests and just stand up straight and take this picture and grip this and all that. And I just felt like I was just a bag of bones. I couldn't hold myself together. From the outside, though, most people would have said, well, he looks like he's in shape, but I knew I was falling apart.
Yep.
And then we came to this, let's go outside and sprint. And I said, okay. And you videotape these, right? And there's no video because I just went, I couldn't. I with 2 steps and the pain was so great, I couldn't do it. And fast forward, now I have no pain. I have no pain at all. I don't know, and I'm interested in your opinion, how long that's going to last. I mean, I still have, it's not like the osteoarthritis went away, but the inflammation around it went away. I'm throwing kicks and punches again. In fact, can we play this? This is just this morning. I went from 1 year. Now, by the way, if it's me sprinting, I'm not going to win any sprinting awards. Okay, and I need to work on some form because my feet, I think, hit the ground a little too hard. But this is a guy who couldn't run at all. That was in huge pain. Let me play it right here. And I'm able to do that right now.
Look at that. That's awesome.
And that was not something that I ever thought I'd do again for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
And without pain. So first of all, thank you. I want to say that.
Absolutely. Thank yourself for coming, believing, and then doing what was just all natural strategies.
Yeah,
That's
and
it.
I want to kind of walk through some of those strategies. But let me ask you this, though. Like, how long can this go? Like, is my
The
hip?
good news is we see no end to this, Dave.
Okay.
So I can't, to save my life, I can't put on a particular age when this might start going away or where it stops waning. So the experience anecdotally working with clients, including clients that are younger than you, all the way to clients in their upper 80s, is that they just continue to improve. Mm-hmm. And so the body is a bit, especially when it has so much disease like an onion, you just got to peel away these layers of disease, and the quality of the human being's life just proportionally improves as that disease process is peeled away. So I would predict, I'm not going to be surprised, and I would predict that you will live pain-free for the rest of your life. This will not come back.
So, this is a classic dad joke that I used to use on my kids all the time. Hey, I can't wait till tomorrow. Why? Because you get better looking every day.
Yeah.
It's actually, it's a real thing now. I can really do it. And by the way, you are 61 years old.
Yeah, just about to turn 62 in just a little over a month. So
yeah, and I've seen the comparison pictures. Maybe we can put those up. We can send those of when you were younger to now. You look younger and definitely more fit than you did then. So do you mind if I just kind of like dive into some particulars?
Sure.
I'm gonna walk through what I did.
Absolutely.
Okay. So, and I do know. I feel a little bit like I'm confessing to my priest because I know that I'm not perfect on this.
Yeah.
But I've come a long way. Especially, I was not a faster, and as a Catholic, I should have been better at fasting, but I was miserable at it. And I came up with every self-justification that you possibly can to try to be okay with God while I was a miserable faster. But now I eat, usually I eat around 10 or 11 o'clock in the morning. I used to eat first thing right when I got up, and I would have carbohydrates, by the way. So I wait until then. And then I usually eat dinner around 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock, and I don't eat after that or between. It's 2 times a day. I have 2 ribeyes for each one of those meals, so about 4 ribeyes a day. Butcher Box go. Pretty good price on Butcher Box for ribeyes. Then I have, probably a cup and a half, if I put it in here, worth of the high-fat but no sugar Greek yogurt. And I have a little bit of cacao in there, which I don't know if you remember last year I said 100% cacao. I mean, oh my gosh, who could even do that? And I even like dark chocolate, but cacao, I thought I was virtually angry at people who admitted they like it because it must have been a lie. Now I love it. Like if someone were to say, here, you could have this bowl of custard with peanut butter and ice cream, or with peanut butter and chocolate, I would take my cacao, no sugar, added high-fat yogurt. But I do what you said, and I have, with each bite of meat, I have many different ferments. My wife and I do the same thing. We have this just tradition for that. I crave nothing. I love that. Then on Wednesdays, I usually eat once and not at all besides that. And then I don't eat on Fridays. Now, there are some social events that make that not so possible if we're having somebody over for dinner or something like that. But generally speaking, I don't eat on Fridays. So that usually ends up being a 36 to sometimes a 40, 48-hour fast. And then every once in a while, I'll extend it a little bit beyond that, a couple times over the past year. I break the rule these two different ways. They're the only ways that I believe that I am breaking it. And that is that I will have whiskey a couple times a week. Not a lot, not excessive, but I'll have a little whiskey and it's delicious to me. I realize, I know. I almost don't want the lecture, but I get it. But way less than I ever used to have. And also, interestingly enough, I don't really have a taste for it after I have a whiskey. I don't want to have anymore. There's an interesting thing that has definitely changed about my taste for it. And then my wife's peanut butter pie, probably every 6 or 8 weeks, I'll have a slice of that when the kids are over and we're feasting. But that's really about it. And if you look at that in fraction, that's probably, in 1 year, all the sugar I've had. And it is equal to what I probably would have had in a 3-week period of time previously.
Yeah.
So those are my sins. Forgive me, doctor. What's my penance?
Yeah. So I would say a solid plan, especially to your listening audience, how different you've described a life probably to the average individual, but it's made all the difference. The world, you were able to, I remember worrying when I told you, please don't have the surgery, hold off and give this a try. I remember thinking, is Dave going to be able to believe me? Will he do this and be able to successfully avoid having surgery? And, your solid plan that you put in place has allowed you to do that. And while everybody else, think about the countless numbers, thousands of people in between last year and today that went ahead and had that surgery. And they'll need other surgeries down the road because the parts that they replace them with are never as good as the parts that, the good Lord puts inside of our body that serves us a lifetime if we live correctly. So, that would be my first comment, that it's a solid plan. And also anecdotally, having taken care of thousands of people, it is very often the case that people, as they start becoming more healthy, find that they cut back on alcohol more and more. They have a level of satiety where they just kind of finish and that's it, as opposed to continue to drink. And then
I am progressing, by the way, toward that.
Yeah, I expect, I'll predict it. We'll see what happens, that you'll eventually give it up. My clients eventually just seem to walk away from alcohol. And you brought up an interesting point a few times with regard to carbohydrates. So looking back now, I have a strong interest in addiction and the tendency and the deep attraction that people have for pursuing pleasurable, kind of sensual kind of feelings, alcohol, tobacco, gambling, prostitution, pornography, all these kind of things feed that part of us that is selfish and wants to have comfort and pleasure, where we seek things for kind of immediate relief. Behind it all seems to be this dependency upon carbohydrates. And when I became a researcher looking at this...
Let me just make sure. So behind all of those addictions, you're saying there's something else?
Everybody uses carbohydrates. I've never seen addiction where there's not also the consumption of carbohydrates.
That's an interesting thing. So I actually just talked about this morning on my radio show, okay? Because this is a very, very related thing. And, we're going to go a little metaphysical here, right? But there are 4 levels of happiness that we all pursue. And this goes back to the great philosophers, Thomas Aquinas, and most recently, Spitzer. But the first is physical. We desire happiness. All of us desire happiness. And so we will eat, drink, have sex, smoke, and consume things because it's the quickest way we have it. Carbohydrates are a big part of that.
Right.
What happens is, and I know that you know this, I'm more or less kind of sharing a philosophy because I think that you're really kind of in on how we can get to this level of happiness by skipping this level. So we desire this, and then if a Hershey bar were the metaphor. I used to give this metaphor before I met you, because now I wouldn't even give it, because I don't think that even the one Hershey bar is good for you. But I would say, listen, if you have a Hershey bar and you haven't had much chocolate or candy, and you're fine. You're not going to kill yourself with a Hershey bar, because there's an order there, right? But if you have 2 Hershey bars or 3, there's a problem. And for every Hershey bar you have, which is also a metaphor for everything else, sex, smoking, drinking, everything, if it's out of order, it's going to bring greater harm.
Yeah.
And then in order to get to even neutral, you need to usually consume twice as much as you did before, because you go down further and further and further, which also includes carbohydrates. But then we go to the second level. And the second, because you're such an educated person, and I know you know philosophy and your faith too, so it'd be interesting your comments on this. The second level is accomplishment. So they say, well, I was an addict, and I gave it up because I knew I needed to do more, so I built a business, earned money, wrote a book, won a gold medal, and I was happier for longer, but then not really as happy as I could be, so I won a second one. I built another company. Then I realized I had to do something else. I had to give. So they become philanthropic. And they start giving more. And that lasts longer until, ultimately speaking, they say, you know what, something's missing. And they go to the existential level of happiness, which is to say, I did not create myself. Who am I? Who made me? And where am I going? And they have to wrestle with God. And we cannot desire something that doesn't exist. We desire food because we have a stomach.
Right.
Okay? And so if we desire this happiness, we're making carbohydrates, in essence, our God.
Yeah.
And the very idea that carbohydrates are tied to all of these other addictions is fascinating.
Isn't it?
So tell me, like, what else have you...
Well, what happened was it wasn't solid research. It's really anecdotal experience with working in this particular space where I advocated the elimination of carbohydrates for the intentional purpose to target this dangerous fat around hearts and muscle and in abdomens. And as a consequence, when people saw those targets and they were able to effectively eliminate carbohydrates, they would come back kind of like at your point a year later, and they would kind of, in a shy kind of a way and awkward say, I never told you this, but when you came to me, I was really an alcoholic, or I was doing a lot of drugs, or I was caught up in pornography, or I was caught up in prostitution, or I did a lot of online gambling. It was this kind of compulsion, this kind of addictive behavior. And they go...
Like consumption-oriented addictive behavior.
It wasn't a dabbling, occasional. It was really amounting to a level of addiction where they were compulsive about it. They were powerless about it. In many cases, it was around for years. Then it started to wane and it went away. Now that man and that woman would come back and say, they would demand, why? Why did this go away when I got rid of visceral fat? Why did this happen? Why was I enabled and able for the first time in my life to walk away from what had dominated my life and tormented me? And my only answer is I see a connection, probably less about visceral fat and more about the feeding of our body with carbohydrates and pleasure. Because carbohydrates are not an essential part of our diet. No serious scientist would ever say that it is a macronutrient, an essential macronutrient where they're needed for survival. Every cell, by the way, in your body, and your audience is probably not aware, not a single contribution from that cell or that structure in your body in any way came from a carbohydrate. It only comes from the other two macronutrients, fat and protein. And so you don't need it to build the body, to sustain the body. And the most helpful perspective I have on carbohydrates is just an outside source of energy to bring into your body instead of allowing your body to make that energy. So what I try to get my clients to understand is they don't have to rely on an outside source. They have everything that they need from within their body to live appropriately. And when you make your own source of energy, it is always the case, Dave, that it's going to be in a better form and better used by your body than if you bring it in from an outside source.
So I saw something that was interesting. You know who Bear Grylls is?
Yeah.
So
from the
he,
TV
he went
character.
like vegan or something like
Yeah,
that for a
he
while.
did,
Do you
yeah.
remember that? And it almost killed him.
Yeah.
And he was like speaking out against,
Right.
people who ate meat and they're destroying the environment and everything else. And
I
then
think he
just
wrote a
like,
book about it, even like you
yeah,
gotta
and
be
he went
vegan.
full bore back in.
Yeah.
But I always thought he missed an opportunity because he should really have a cookbook. It should be called Bear Grylls Meat. It'd be perfect. But,
Yeah, it's catchy.
but yeah, but
You need to do marketing for it.
how about that? But the thing is, while I always knew, that meat was essential, I didn't realize how good red meat was. And I always had the concerns that I was going to get cancer, like everybody said, and all these false things. But I heard somebody one time, and it had to have been a propagandist because the dude was really jacked and strong, and he was a vegetarian. And somebody said to him, and he had the best reply I've ever heard to this, okay? And I think I know the answer to it actually now because I've educated myself, but I want you to rebut what he said.
Okay.
He said, yeah, people come up to me and they go, you're as strong as an ox. How can you be as strong as an ox if you don't eat meat? And his reply was, have you ever seen an ox eat meat? That's pretty clever, isn't it?
Yeah.
But what's the difference between us and an ox? Because the dude was jacked.
Yeah.
But, I just saw another influencer that was a vegan, passed away, woman from malnutrition also. I don't know if you saw that too. But
That
anyway,
happens all the time.
What's your response to this?
So my response is that every ox and every strong animal, and there are many strong animals out there, has to eat a species-specific appropriate diet. And so ox can't consume and benefit
several
from meat.
stomachs?
They basically have multiple stomachs that allow them to ferment and do magic with grass that our bodies can't do with plants and vegetation. So it's a species-appropriate diet. So animals are strong and vigorous when they eat the appropriate diet. And, for oxes, it's not meat. And for humans, in my opinion, it is meat. And I advocate what you're doing, and why I got you to eat fermented foods is because I call it the living carnivore diet, because in reality, Dave, in the past, for most of our existence, from the beginning of time, we did not eat sterilized packaged meat that came in butcher paper and was in supermarket packages and free of microbes. The meat we ate was rich in the microbes from the animal that we hunted. Mm-hmm. And the lifestyle of that animal was basically carried in their microbiome that got on that meat, in the hide, in the flesh, and into that animal. And it was imparted to us. We would handle that. We didn't have soap. And also we drank water that came from creeks and rivers that were teeming with microbes. So the biggest difference between humans of today from humans of past is the absence of these microbes that were so prevalent in our existence before. And today we live in this sterilized world, and we're missing out on that. And our microbiome, which is our most important feature of our most important physical asset, our physical asset being our bodies, are most important because they dictate whether we're going to enjoy life or suffer life. I think my soul is my most important asset, but my body becomes my most important physical, tangible aspect. The one feature that's most critical to defining how healthy your body is your microbiome. So that's why I advocate this living carnivore diet. I call it meat and microbes, eating with fermented foods, and then also trying to get as many beneficial microbes into your lifestyle as possible. And then this notion of kind of fleshy and prostitution and gambling and drugs and things starts to take on a new area of importance, because oftentimes in those kind of environments you get a lot of bad microbes. And so when you have exposure to those kind of activities, you're being exposed to this. Now here's the interesting insight that I've come up with looking back now as a former prosecutor and a former police officer. What's remarkable to me, and I think, there is a divine order of my life. I went, law enforcement into criminal prosecution and then to medical school. From medical school, now a serious researcher looking at the best ways to biologically optimize people, which just led me to this microbiome, is the awareness and the daunting nature that I have to dare to ask the question, what role do these microbes play in human behavior? And more specifically, do microbes have a role in contributing to criminality and what we would regard as suboptimal suboptimal existence of human beings? In other words, is the lack of proper living, maybe criminal behavior, and which is just codified, really in part influenced by these microbes that are in our environment and causing us to do this? So you see this, a kind of a case for this is somebody will make a mistake, end up going into jail, and they come out worse. One, they learn behavior, but two, they also are exposed to a lot of these microbes. And not to get too woo-woo, but I think sexual offenders really have basically are infected with microbes that are driving the need to go out and propagate the species and forcing the hosts to go out and engage in sexual behavior just to spread the microbes within society. And so if you think about young children, this explains why kids get traumatized, they get sexually offended, and then they're free until they reach age of sexual maturity. Then they go out and offend. And we don't have a good explanation why this is happening at such a rate. And the other interesting thing is we can't correct them. We can't. There's no ability to rehabilitate them. So we put sexual offenders on websites with their photographs and their zip codes and what they look like and who they are, and say, this person is so bad, you need to know about them because they're just likely to offend again. And it's because, Dave, we're not treating the underlying infection that is present in them. And so I'm just positing it for the serious-minded people in society. I think we need to investigate this and take a look at the nature and role of the microbiome with regard to human behavior.
So let me play a devil's advocate position, which, by the way, I actually don't hold, because I want to talk about the brilliance of what you just said there, and I have no need to agree with you. You're happy to argue the truth regardless on that level, but I'm agreeing because it makes so much sense. But the devil's advocate would say, Sean, you're saying that these people don't actually have free will anymore. They can't control themselves. Are you kidding me? And people definitely, especially want to take a sexual predator and really demonize them. That would be the devil's advocate. The other side that I would say is, listen, okay, somebody's a bank robber, they can learn to not rob. I also heard that arsonists can't be cured. I don't know if that's true or not, but I did hear a psychologist say that one time. I need to look into that. Maybe we can do a fact check on that. But
that is interesting. I haven't heard that.
Yeah, I heard that those are the only two cases. Now we have to fact check it, but I did hear that once. But you would say, universally, people know that when people have been abused, they quite often become abusers. And then some don't. There's a small percentage that end up being just fine in life and they move on. But if it's such a high percentage have a difficult time getting past that, this would lead to a good explanation. In the same way that if you're a drunk, you're less culpable for what you do when you're drunk.
Right.
And people know that. And so
I'll talk about alcohol, but let me return to the sexual offenders. And that was a really well done devil advocacy because it prompted me to think about. So for anybody in the audience who's listening to this, watching the show now, what I will say is I'm going to take you back to that package of cookies, chips, and ice cream where you were consuming it and you shouldn't, and you felt powerless to the proclivity, this incredible attraction and dependency and maybe addiction to that particular food. And that's what's going on in an even deeper level with sexual offenders. They have these microbes in there. So, we have...
so to go back further to the microbe thing.
Yeah.
This, because I'd never heard about... And I also do want you to talk about the mice at some point too, the study on the two different identical mice.
Yeah.
But addiction microbes, the microbe themselves, you're saying that when a person consumes these bad microbes and they're in their body, and we know that this type of thing happens in that you could be around someone with the flu and you get a contagion,
right?
And you have that
temporary infection, sure.
A temporary infection. Microbes are a deeper thing, a longer
in the microbiome.
Microbiome,
they can live within your gut and influence your behavior. And supportive of this premise is also what we're seeing with a medical procedure called a fecal microbiota transplant, where we take feces it's being done every day all across our country, feces from one human being and transplant it into another who needs it because they have a particular infection called C. difficile, pseudomembranous colitis. It's the only indication, Dave, that physicians are permissibly allowed to transplant stool from one human into another. And this is a medical procedure.
At a micro level?
Well, it is in a macro level in essence, because it amounts to about maybe a teaspoon of the stool that gets transplanted. So it's on a macro level.
I don't want to go
can
too
see
deep.
it.
How do they transplant?
Yeah, so it used to be done through colonoscopy.
Okay.
And now it's the most effective and easiest way to do it is through encapsulation. So they'll take the stool.
That's hard medicine to take.
I know. Well, they process it a little
bit. Your medicine's going to be really crappy.
Yeah. So the crappy stick. So they take this and they process it into kind of a desiccated form. So it's kind of like powderized. You still, in essence, know what it is, but for people that have it, believe me, they're so sick. They're actually going to die because they're no longer responsive to antibiotics. Now, what happens when they study this is a lot of there's a lot of transference of behavior, personality. Really? Depression is either is experienced by the person who receives it if the donor has depression or anxiety, or the opposite. Very powerfully. If they have depression, but the person who's the donor doesn't, they can be cured of depression, cured of anxiety. So we see all this cross pattern of behavior and disease that gets either cured or passed on based on a donor. So
why would you be a donor? Why would you receive the donation of somebody who is depressed or has these bad things in the first place?
Well, exactly. So today, now this has been around since about 2010.
Okay.
So we have about 15 years of experience. We have learned this. Believe it or not, they were taking heavy obese people's stool, putting it to these other people's, and they would be cured of their C. difficile, but then they'd suddenly become obese. And so we've learned that now this is a concern, and so we screen. So the question becomes to the very fast-minded individual, I will say, you are already thinking, well, if I get that procedure, I want the healthiest man or woman. And if you thought that, you're a fast adopter. Mm-hmm. You're an innovator. And you should look for opportunities to invest, because one of the biggest areas in healthcare in the future will be FMTs, because we can cure, when we go back and data mine who's had these FMTs, we have cured Crohn's disease. In one study, out of 200 people that had a C. difficile, 60 of them had underlying Crohn's besides C. difficile infection. And of those 60 people that had Crohn's, 19, or roughly 1/3 of them, were in fact cured from their Crohn's disease. Now, Crohn's is there is no cure. It's a lifelong treatment with autoimmune suppressing immune suppressing medications, and you're on medicines for the rest of your life. But 19 of these 60 got cured, and then they studied those 19 people, and they found that 11 of them, Dave, came from a single donor. So what that means is that donor, whoever he or she was a super donor. So they had the capacity, their microbiome was so healthy that they go in and when they're used as a donor, they can eradicate disease. So if you're that person that was innovative enough to think, I want a really healthy person, now you can realize we don't know what the end of that is. What is the healthiest person in the world? But if we could find them, they're going to have the ability not only to eradicate disease, but significantly improve the lives of thousands of people, because it doesn't take much. So this is a big area of research, and this is where I'm going to go. I'm developing a company that really wants to leverage the microbiome and identify the healthiest men and women in the world to eradicate disease and increase human existence.
So anecdotally, I said to a friend one time, they said, it was so-and-so's relative, in their own home. And I said, no, I don't remember seeing him there. And and they were trying to describe him, and I said, does he look like he eats at the same table? And he said, yes. And I was just kind of making an anecdotal, I wasn't even trying to be disrespectful, but like, do they look like they ate at the same table? You kind of know what I mean there, right?
Yeah.
But I think, would it be accurate to say, because that's kind of like a condemnation to say that if a family happens to be all overweight or in shape or not, that they all eat healthy. But as I look at that, I don't really see that that's the case. But yet you see these families where they're kind of pretty trim and put together, and I just kind of attributed it to genetics, or maybe it was all diet. But is there a microbiome element to that? Like
1,000%.
Okay, so
I mean, just walk down the mall, you'll see heavy-set kids with full, chubby faces. You'll glance up about the taller figures around them, their mom and dad, they'll be heavy. And so these microbes are shared within a family.
In other words, it's the microbiome that they're...
Absolutely.
So my daughter says to me, and I think I might have mentioned this on the last show. She actually said it either like the day before or the day after, or maybe I went to see you. I don't remember if it was part of the last program, but she said, Dad, she just became a nurse. And she said, all these nurses in the ER are so overweight and unhealthy. And it's crazy because it's not like they don't eat healthy or they don't have like a desire to be healthy, but they're all overweight. Now, by the way, I can understand how unfair that would be to all ER nurses. I don't mean it that way. But is there a tendency or a reason for these types of things?
1,000%.
Okay.
So let me explain a little bit more. You're going to have another conversation with your daughter. The two areas in the hospital, and by the way, I've been in medicine for 30 years. The two areas where you see the most heaviest employees are in ERs and ICUs. And you know who those employees are? They're nurses, not the techs, not so much the nursing assistants, and not the doctors, and not the admin staff. So why are the nurses
especially
have a higher level of
and
obesity?
they generally want to be healthy?
They do. They're running around, and there's not a lot of lazy people in the ERs. So why did the nurses get heavy? It's because of this one insight I saw. The one thing that nurses do in the ER, and by the way, I am an ER physician. I'm trained in emergency medicine. That's where I spent most of my time working. And I also spent a lot of time in ICUs.
So you noticed this then yourself too?
1,000%.
Yeah.
And here's what's going on. One thing that the nurses do that none of the other staff do, and it's predicated in the fact that it's in ERs and ICUs and not the other areas of the hospital. And the reason is the ERs and ICUs are kind of like the areas where when you're dying and you're most sick, that's where you're going to go. You're not going to go to the medical floor for, a little treatment with an IV antibiotic. When you're really sick, the most pathologic, the most diseased people go into the ER and then they get transferred to the ICU. So it's those two areas where the sickest people are. So why the nurses and not the doctors and not the nursing assistants and the other techs and stuff? Because the nurses do one thing that nobody else does. They change the bedding and the clothing when somebody has a bowel movement in that bed. They're exposed to those microbes. We call it a code brown. Code blue, somebody stops breathing, their heart stops, everybody goes that. The code brown, it's the sole nurse, that professional RN, that's dedicated themselves to care for that person in need that can no longer take care of their own bodily function. And they need their linens changed, they need their bedding changed, they need their clothing changed, they need a dignified professional response to that. And as much as that nurse might wash her hands or his hands, they're going to get those microbes and they go into them. And then I see those nurses in the back room eating sandwiches going, I don't know why I cannot lose this weight. And so they simply become infected with obesogenic microbes.
So does that increase their desire for things like carbohydrates?
100%, 1,000%. So those microbes need... I mentioned human beings have a dependency on fat and protein. Mm-hmm. There are species of microbes that are dependent upon carbohydrates. Wow. They will die without carbohydrates. And so they drive the host to eat for them. And that's why you can't stop eating the box of cookies, why you got to keep going back and eating something with carbohydrates. People feel this need to keep doing it. It's almost like I've always felt like I'm almost possessed by, something that comes over me and it's not me. I can't help myself. You can't, because these microbes in you are wired into your behavior and they influence the host. They influence the host to eat for them because, Dave, they can't leave your body. If they don't have an ability through biochemical influence, through their network to influence the host, they're going to die. And the drive to live and survive is so strong. You would fight. If I came after you, try to kill you, everybody in this room right now would see the fight of your life. Mm-hmm. And that's the way they are. And that's why the level of intensity behind the cravings of a human being for carbohydrates comes from these obesogenic microbes that cause disease. And they want the carbohydrate. They want their host to eat that. And that's what's happened to you, why those cravings are going away, because you are eating
those
fat
microbes
and protein.
Are they like, they die? Is
They're,
that what it is?
they're dying. They go away. And also they're being killed by the fermented foods, because they're opportunistic. So the beneficial microbes that come from the living fermented foods. And the fermented foods I advocate is because they're living bacteria, beneficial. And so Asian cultures, many cultures, have a tradition of eating fermented foods with their meals. It's not so much an American practice, but if you look at these traditional countries where people have always been thin and healthy, and we would laud the lack of disease within Asian cultures, it's because they have this practice of always eating fermented foods. So you still have to worry, Dave, about getting these obesogenic microbes, because when you go to Target or Walmart, you touch a handrail, an escalator, you touch an elevator button. Those are riddled with microbes, including those that are obesogenic.
How do you avoid becoming monk?
You just always eat those fermented foods. You just always live a healthy lifestyle so that you're getting good microbes.
If you eat those, have the healthy lifestyle, you don't have to worry about touching the elevator.
You don't have to.
Yeah.
You don't have to. In fact, you want a certain exposure to even bad microbes to exercise your body's immunity. If you lived in a sterile world.
The only reason that I have the peanut butter pie every 6 weeks. Little exposure.
Did you see how fast Dave thought of that? That was well played.
Self-justification is the second strongest motivator of human beings.
Well played.
Okay, what I would like to do now, because this has been just fascinating, is I want to move into a little bit of the practical side for people on this. I want to talk about some of the things that I have done according to your coaching, and tell us why it works and what's happening there. One of them is stop with cardio and jack up sprinting. So I've been sprinting every other day. I do 6 sprints lasting 10 to 20 seconds. As much as it doesn't look like that, in my own mind, I had a Bengal tiger chasing me. That's how fast I run. And so I've got that heavy breathing. And then after that, for me, I've started doing kicks and punches. I never thought I could do it again, as a fighter when I was young. And
isn't it feeling great to have that come back?
That feels amazing. And like I thought, well, maybe I'll just do this a little bit just to loosen up. Now I find myself, my kicks and punches are getting stronger and stronger. And I have this little thought, maybe I should go into one of these like grandmaster, I'm not a grandmaster, I'm a secondary black belt, but what are they called? They're grand championships or whatever. The old guys fight. And fight again. I don't know if I'll do that or not, but it's
I think you'll be doing it because
you're
just, you're only into this 1 year. I've been doing it now 15 years. And there's no end in sight. I mean, it's going to be hard for you to grasp just how much more benefit you're going to get for the decades ahead in your life. So I predict you will be.
My daughter asked me if I was Benjamin Button.
Isn't that nice to hear? That's awesome.
Yeah. So okay. So why sprinting? Why not cardio? Everybody would say cardio is so good for you. What is the reality here?
They do. So it's one of those common beliefs that distance running and durational exercise, and by the way, it's not just jogging and running, it also is cycling and maybe rowing and anything that you do for a long period of time, is it becomes basically stressful, and it starts to lead to deterioration. It inflames your body. The medium by which it's occurring is through cortisol. So cortisol is this stressful response that our body will produce this hormone that gets created when we fight or we have some kind of a fight or flight scenario where we have sympathomimetic. So you have basically two systems. Your sympathomimetic, your fight or flight, either I'm running or I'm going to fight, or you have a parasympathetic existence where you're calm and relaxed. Most of your life should be in a parasympathetic, calm, relaxed state. But when you start doing durational exercise and jogging and running, then you're in a prolonged state. The cortisol gets produced and it stays high. When you sprint, there's a spike and it comes back down lower than where it was before. So actually a sprint will take your, let's say you have a level of cortisol that's modest or moderately high, and because it's from stress from work, you sprint, there'll be a bump, and then it will go down lower than where it was before you sprinted. And so sprinting lowers your cortisol. Jogging, durational exercise, and by the way, gym bros, going to the gym and working out for 2 hours or an hour and a half or 3 hours, however long you're in there, will jack up your cortisol and keep it high. Now, cortisol, very interesting, is catabolic to a very important type of fat called superficial subcutaneous fat. So what do bodybuilders look like? Shredded, striated muscles. You see a six-pack because they've lost their sub-Q fat. It's also catabolic to your muscle. So when you have a lot of stress in your life, you're a prisoner of war, you're doing distance running, doing marathons and ultra marathons. And right now, think about a world champion marathoner, scrawny body without much muscle tissue. So they're actually catabolizing, basically eating away their muscle. And the sprinters, when they're standing in gold, when sprinting champions of the world or sprinting champions in college, high school, they're built, they got nice big bodies. The cross-country runners, even in high school, they're thin and scrawny. And so you're losing your muscle through that sustained running and cycling. If you look at bicyclists, the only muscles that they have big are big on their legs, and they have little tiny scrawny arms, little tiny chests. You'll never see them, what's his name, Armstrong, take off his shirt and show off his buff body. He doesn't have a buff body. So that cortisol loses your muscle and loses your beneficial fat. But it is anabolic, meaning it promotes the growth of visceral fat. So this dangerous fat that I got you educated about, and we did an MRI within your abdomen. So distance runners, cyclists, anybody that does a lot of durational exercise, bodybuilders, they're filled, sorry women, sorry guys, you're filled with visceral fat. If you are bodybuilding at the champion competing level, you just don't know about it. No, I got no fat in my body. I'm a bodybuilder. I'm shredded, just muscle. I got 6% body fat. No, you got visceral fat. You just don't know about it. You just haven't had that MRI scan.
And Sean, I just want to, because this is such a good point right here, because this is the first, I think, and tell me if I'm wrong, is this first we've talked about visceral fat? Because I've talked to Sean so much here. Did we talk about my scans and when he saw them, what he said to me? I don't think we talked about that.
No.
So, okay. So I want to bring this up because this was a salient point.
Okay.
So I wanted to meet with you so that I wasn't in pain and I could avoid hip surgery. So as far as I'm concerned, mission accomplished. I got this mission done. I'm running fine. And if I'd have known you could help me do that, that was it. Well, you introduced me to something that, frankly speaking, was like getting a D or an F on my lifetime report card. And you do these scans of my body and my brain, my brain all the way through my torso. And you said to me, I remember the conversation this way. I think you alluded to this or maybe said one or the other or whatever, but this is the summary takeaway that I remember you saying. And it was, do you want the good news or the bad news? And I said, the good news. And you said, well, on the outside, you look a little like Mark Wahlberg. I said, what's the bad news? And you said, well, on the inside, you look exactly like Chris Farley. And that was devastating. And, we're looking at the scans, some of them kind of live. You hadn't looked at them until we were going through there, because I got them done in the morning, I think. And I saw the look on your face. that you were kind of trying to hide it to like make me feel a little bit better.
Yeah.
But
It was
eventually
scary.
you just kind of stopped making me feel okay. And you're like, brother, you have some serious work to do. And I said, how long is it going to take to get rid of that visceral fat? And I want to come back to this whole idea of visceral fat because we're talking about it and still some people are probably like, well, what does that matter? And you said probably 2 years, maybe 2.5 years. And I'm like, I want it done tomorrow, guy, you know? And it's been 1 year. I haven't gotten the scans again. I know that like if I was, you know, just me, I'm done. I'm good. I can run. I feel better. But I know we're going to get my scans. I'm going to get them probably this next week. And then we're going to bring you back. We're going to show you the scans. And you can tell me, like, if it was supposed to take 2.5 years, how have I done? Am I 30% better? Am I 40% better? Am I on pace there? Did I get ahead of that schedule? I don't know. But what I do know from talking to you is that virtually every disease is somehow tied to visceral fat. So I'm hoping you can make a couple connections to us. Why don't people talk about it? That's one question. How is microbiome, microbes related to the visceral fat discussion that we're having? What are the diseases that show up due to visceral fat? Again, how are they connected to microbiome? And then we're going to get into what does a sauna do?
Yeah.
Why get rid of fluoride? I have all these natural soaps now. I have different deodorants. My kids are like, I like hippie dad. You know, I was never hippie dad. And you know what? There's a lot I just threw at you, but let's start with that.
Yeah. So to unpack that, you know, the visceral fat is really an eye-opening target to take a look at. It's something that nobody else has really looked at, and it's not used by physicians to educate clients to optimize their health, to improve their health.
Fat around your...
It's invisible obesity.
Yeah.
So it's fat you cannot see from the outside of your body. If you can pinch the fat on the outside of your body, that's your sub-Q fat. And sub-Q fat actually is protective because it releases a molecule called adiponectin that reduces your incidence and mortality for heart attacks, strokes, cancer, neurodegenerative conditions like MS, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, dementia. So there's a lot of protection that comes from the subcutaneous fat. And yet that's the kind of thing that marketing world wants us to get rid of. They want six-pack abs. So the thing that, you know, the system tells us is desirable, getting rid of sub-Q fat, in fact, is taking away our defense against a lot of disease. But the very thing that causes and associated so strongly with disease, and if you doubt it, like whatever ails you, whatever condition you have, whatever it is, jump on Google and put a comma behind it and then put visceral fats. And look at the studies that have already been done on it, and you'll be very surprised that how much we already know about the association with visceral fat to that particular condition. Then you can ask the question, why isn't that being taught to me? Why didn't my physician tell me about this? And if you go in and ask your physician, why didn't you tell me about it? The reality is they don't know anything about it themselves because it's not part of the curriculum in medical schools. So sadly, visceral fat is not taught or discussed in any serious way within medical schools because, one, as you mentioned earlier, nothing influences disease more than visceral fat, and nothing has a greater role in improving people as a target in at least medical imagery any kind of a medical diagnostic procedure to include blood work. I've completely abandoned blood work for just visceral fat. I just have my clients track the fat around their heart, fat in their muscle, fat in their abdomen, and the blood work just changes so much. I mean, you can repeat your blood work in a week, and the vast majority of them will be different again.
One of my relatives was eating all salads, and I said, here's some steaks. And, well, I'm on lipids and da-da-da-da-da, and I might, but, I'll try it. Went off of medicines, ate steak, cholesterol went down. And, but I know I've talked to you before this, and you're like, what is cholesterol? Why were you talking about cholesterol? Should I be worried when I have 4 ribeyes a day that I'm going to have a heart attack?
Not at all. So I think what we're going to find out, as as a prediction, I will say, I'll attach my name behind this, in the year 2025, I think we're going to migrate from a country and a world and a species where we will dismiss cholesterol and in favor of tracking the first and most powerful expression disease in the human body is not your cholesterol levels or your lipid levels or your markers within a lipid panel, cholesterol panel, but in fact the fat, inflammatory fat around your heart, the inflammatory fat invading your muscle, replacing your muscle, and inflammatory fat within your surrounding your organs in your abdomen. So those will be understood eventually as far more powerful. And on a consumer level, okay, this is Dr. Sean now, physician Sean talking to business guru Dave. When the consumer understands that they have been buying into a system for decades, where they've gone for years and years to a healthcare system that gives them medicine, and they've been optimizing this elusive target called cholesterol while they continue to fall apart. And they notice that these individuals that start to rise up within society and are revealed through social media, that their lives are improving when they are targeting visceral fat and muscle fat and heart fat. Then they're going to realize, I've been following the wrong thing. They'll make that pivot, and that's when we'll have a disruption within healthcare. And healthcare is the largest market, Dave, in the United States. It dusts the internet, it dusts petroleum. Healthcare is the big giant, and over 90% of it is chronic disease. Mm-hmm. And it's completely reversible, preventable, if we just get rid of visceral fat. But preceding, you talked about the microbiome, preceding the emergence of visceral fat, which we see very early on, even in childhood, is the beginning disruption of the microbiome through bad diet, exposure to parents and other human beings that have bad microbes. Birds of a feather flock together. Who you keep the company of and with has an influence in your microbiome, and how you live, the decisions to exercise, the decisions to use a sauna, the decisions to go outside and be outdoors in nature. All of these things influence the makeup of the species of microbes that live in you and on you. And this is why insights into how you live is so important to how you will be living in the future, because these microbes will continue to reproduce and be a part of your makeup for the rest of your life. So when you eat that chocolate bar, you think you're just making a decision for that moment that gets diluted and goes away. But the problem is you just provided a food source for bad microbes. They're going to live in you now. Instead of starving and dying out, they're going to be sustained and propagated
and
live within you.
How long?
Well, they don't live very long. Typically, they only live a few days. But their ancestors will live in you for the rest of their lives if you don't kill them. By cutting out carbohydrates completely.
It out altogether.
You cannot make any provision for any of that, and that's where people get into problems. They just always keep returning to carbohydrates.
Okay, so I mean, we could do a whole seminar on this. In fact, I think we're going to.
Okay.
But let's do a couple of different things. The sauna. I've been doing that, and I can just tell you that there are benefits that, even if nobody told me something was happening on the inside, just like I'm relaxed, it's almost like a melatonin effect. But
yeah, let's
talk about the value of sauna, and then the difference between the UV and the natural saunas.
Yeah. So I'm glad you brought up sauna. So it's been a practice for traditional people, a health optimizing practice for centuries. Probably thousands of years. Really early in existence, we would get around campfires and there'd be wigwams and kind of hot pot things and things that we get around sources of heat. And our ancestors learned, they had very good senses, and they could figure out what would improve us as a species and as an individual. So what we know today, applying principles of scientific studies, that the largest study that ever was looked at, the practice of sauna, found that it was dose dependent, and meaning The more you do, the healthier you become. And they found individuals, this was done in Norway, the Norwegians, they're very fond of doing saunas, that if you did a sauna 1 to 2 times a week, that you would reduce the incidence of mortality, the rate of death from heart attacks, by about 20 to 22%, doing it 1 to 2 times a week. And you'd reduce your all-cause mortality from everything else: cancer, dementia, strokes, gastrointestinal disease, all manner of disease follow the rate of death was reduced about the same level, about 20%. But if you did the sauna 4 to 7 times a week, almost every day, they noticed that the rate of death from cardiovascular disease, heart attacks and strokes, was reduced over 50%. So how is it that something as beneficial as using a sauna, which you've already pointed out is enjoyable and has all these other benefits, that can reduce the rate of mortality from heart attacks and strokes, which is, Dave, the number one killer of human beings? If it's that significant in reduction of mortality, why aren't physicians, cardiologists taught this? So
financially things would crumble.
Yeah, well, it would cut into the big business.
Yeah,
I mentioned it was the largest.
And you don't have to write a prescription. You don't have to feel too cool to say.
And you
to
can't
somebody,
make money off it. When I
can't.
tell somebody to use a sauna, there's no compensation, and that was to my point. We got to figure out how we reward physicians and future professionals in the future that help people live better lives and eradicate disease. They have to be compensated.
Yeah.
And we have to figure that out. And it's going to be disease genius. Listen, where are you? You might be in the audience right now. I'm a desperate clinician that knows how to heal people. It's your obligation, business professionals, to figure out how we're going to take this and make a lot of money in the right way.
I've been thinking about this before you got here.
Okay.
And we're gonna do this. So one of the things that I do here is I help people build habits. If I were to really summarize what I do, sure, we go in and we solve all the problems. You have a marketing problem, you have an advertising problem. The number one problem for people in their business is you can't give what you don't have. So your advertising problem, why does one person who has the same access to advertising solutions find them and somebody else not? All of us have we can all start a business. We have the same access to most technologies, to most markets. We can go where we want, do what we want. We can copy people that are getting things done. But you have somebody that, with almost an identical product, fail. It's because they can't give what they don't have. It's usually centered on vice, which, by the way, is totally tied to what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Lack of influence, which we haven't even gotten into, by the way. What happens when a person looks healthy?
Yeah.
And how is somebody attracted to that?
Yeah.
How does it elevate that? So we've got that to talk about. So I help people build their habits. And one of the things that I think happens most often is people get into programs, self-help programs, health programs, diet programs, fitness programs. Like the number of people that I've talked to, I'm not, what am I called if I eat ferments and stuff, but yet mostly meat? What is it?
Meat and Microbes, the Living Carnivore Diet?
Yeah, so what is the title?
The Living Carnivore Diet.
The Living Carnivore Diet. Because I always I'm a carnivore, but not really, because I also have fermented foods. Okay.
Yeah.
And I will tell you, when you live this lifestyle, it becomes a topic of conversation beyond what I ever want it to be. Like I don't want to talk about my
wife out there. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I don't want to have to talk about my diet every time I go someplace to eat, but people are just so intrigued by it. And there's always one person in the crowd that goes, I tried that for like 3 months. I go, how did it go? And they go, great. I lost 40 pounds. I felt awesome, but I just had to go back to the habits that they had. And
they got reinfected with bad microbes.
Yeah. So what happens is there's a moment that they go back to it. So that's my mission, is to help people. That's why I wrote Leading Giants. It's the Influence Mastery Handbook. Okay. How to maximize influence. Frankly speaking, you really can't do it if you're not in health. And so I want to draw people into these healthy habits of influence and lifestyle. And this is at the center of it. So we're going to figure this out together, by the way.
Yeah, man.
We're going to figure it out together.
Right on. You came up with the observation, you understand, and I've long said that if you really want to be an effective business leader or governmental, political leader or a performer, you've got to be healthy because It affects your appearance and your performance, and those are the two qualities that you're going to lead to either use to lead people and influence people, or to entertain them, or whatever it is that you're doing. But here's a confession that I will share with you as a physician, that I have seen many business professionals come to me, and they optimize their health, but they are struggling in the area of success. So they are just mediocre or very poor business people. They can't, their business is failing. These are people that they abound everywhere. And the bottom line is they hunt poorly. They can't come back with meat. Mm-hmm. They go out and hunt, Dave, and they don't come back with meat. It's the smallest little tiny thing. They come out with a dead sparrow that they found on a path instead of that big bison. Mm-hmm. And the problem is they never got the techniques. Nobody taught them, was around them, like a Dave Durand or another successful business influencer that says, you know what? I learned this song, how to be a successful business guy and how to make a good living. And you take that song and you share that with them. They never got around you. They never learned that. So here's my insight. I can't help that person that does all these things to optimize their health, and if they cannot hunt and bring back the meat, because you know why? They get cortisol. They're stressed out. They can't feed themselves. They can't feed their family, and so it goes nowhere. So there is a need in society today to have the ability to speak to the need to hunt and bring back meat. You got to be successful in whatever you do, and you also have to be healthy. You have to optimize your health. So it's optimization of wealth. You got to make money. Optimization of health so that you have an ability to be even more effective in life. And the ultimate balance, I think, to keep those two things in perspective is optimizing your faith. So you don't become prideful, and you also don't become too greedy. Because if you make too much money, you don't have a proper perspective, you can't use that in the manner in which you have talked about to be more enlightened and get to that level where you can be more generous and start doing more significant things through philanthropy. So I'm the only physician that I think that I've ever heard that says, look, if you're not making money, you're not going to really be healthy. You're not there. There's this, I see business coming together with some enlightened individuals that like myself and my other physicians are working with me, and health coaches that know how to get people healthy, working together to build a model that actually serves humanity by doing those two things, hunting well and then optimizing your health.
Yeah. And I mean, if you think about that too, there's like all these studies of happiness, and they say, well, you can't buy happiness. Well, turns out to a certain degree you can. There was the famous study that came out, I don't know what it was, maybe how many years ago, 7 years ago, that showed that, so we have to go back in time as far as what the dollars were then, but at a certain level, $75,000 of income is what it was. Beneath that, the percentage of people who were actually happy was much lower. And there was a threshold of 75,000 where their certain needs were met. So when people say you can't buy happiness, tell that to a person that can't buy dinner for their family.
Right.
Okay? So it's
That's a really good point.
It's disingenuous. And people usually say you can't buy happiness from like a self-righteous perspective.
Exactly. I agree with that.
Yeah. Now, what happens, we also know, is the other side, which is you start to identify who you are with your money or your items or your things. And you have to have a detachment from these things, which is why, biblically speaking, it's not money that's the root of all evil. It's the love of money that's the root of all evil. And so if we're detached from the things that we have, we can actually go after it and conquer it and build and do great things. And the other key, of course, is just to spend less than you earn, which is a big part of it.
Yeah, discipline.
Yeah, very much so, discipline. So, okay, so I love where we're going in this conversation. I do want to come back to a few other things, because I know there's like these mysteries that people have about some of these things. So
the last thing I want to say about sauna, because before we depart from that, because you brought up as important, is if the individual does sauna for 4 to 7 times a week, and by the way, it's about 15 to 20 minutes, not a real long time. Temperature-wise, it's around 180 degrees. That person will reduce the incidence of dementia an astounding 65%. 65%.
So at what age? Like, let's say somebody's hearing this and they're 65. Is there hope?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So even if you have early onset dementia, you have memory impairment at that early age, the process is disease reversal. And we even know the mechanism by this is occurring, that diseased tissue is replaced with healthier tissue through protein production, through these chaperone proteins that show up where protein is being made. Chaperones show up and make sure good things happen. So these proteinaceous compounds that are called chaperone proteins get created. They're heat shock proteins in the presence of a sauna, this heat. And so you will have better production of tissue when you've had some exposure to sauna and reverses. So I love that you brought that up. Is it too late? No, it's never too late for that man or woman to make a decision to start living more healthy. Mm-hmm. And so they should be investing intentionally with good, healthy habits. And I would like to see us return. We in the Bible, it talks about some biblical characteristics. Moses and Abraham are like 500 and 1,500 years old. And I don't know that we'll ever see that, probably not in our lifetime. But we can continue to improve our microbiomes, eliminate this inflammatory fat that we're now becoming aware of, which, by the way, shows up in the body in other ways outside the body. So you get spider veins. You can have an inflamed-looking face. You can just have a sagging tissue with your muscles not very well defined. All these are markers of proxy for this inflammatory fat inside us that I think our species were aware of. So I did want to make that one point about sauna, how beneficial it is with regard to cognition and dementia.
I'm glad you said that. I'm also glad that you mentioned the 500 to 1,500 year, like Noah, whatever, 900, or, Adam. Some people just immediately debate that. And I'm not saying I know anything here, but that's a pretty funny thing. Adam goes to the doctor. It's like, let's go through your family history. Any heart disease? No, man, I'm it.
Yeah.
Well, you're pretty old, aren't you? Compared to what? I mean, how old is old? I mean, I'm 900, but I'm the youngest of my generation.
The answer biologically, I would posit, is probably the microbiome back in earlier days was so much better than the microbiome today. There's a very clear consensus that the microbiome continues to deteriorate for those that are researchers in the microbiome space. And then we have this continued deterioration of the microbiome. But what would happen to our species if we turn that around? And that is what happened to Dave Durand. That is what happened to Sean O'Mara. We turned our microbiomes around through living correctly. And just the way, running a business through correct principles, correct leadership principles will improve that individual, utilizing those principles for this elusive target that majority of people in the audience don't really know much about, the microbiome. But once you start applying those principles, that too will improve with dramatic improvement and beneficial effect in our lives.
It's funny. Here's an anecdotal thing. And then I want to get into things like fluoride and soaps and scents and all that. But I mentioned, and Julie, you kind of like laughed a little bit, that every time you eat when you're on the living carnivore diet or even a carnivore, it becomes the topic of conversation even if you don't want it to be. And the reason is people are so intrigued by it, because I think most people, and usually if there's like 8 people in the room, there's one person who did it and stopped. There's somebody who did it, stopped, but they really want to talk more about it and do it. There was somebody, and for me the last time, it was an oncologist, I believe, who was like, I'm going to try that. And knew nothing about it. We talked about it, and they seemed to be pretty convinced.
Fantastic.
But what's interesting, so there's a live conversation. Have you ever been in that room with somebody who says, I'm a vegan? A totally different thing happens.
Yeah.
What happens there is, oh, my sister did that for a little while.
Yeah.
But she was sneaking meat in her bedroom. It was fake. And it's a conversation killer.
Yeah.
Nobody's like, tell me more. I need to know more. I think almost like I should be like that. Nobody does that. Like there's got to be something about human nature that if we respond that way collectively. So anyway.
Great observation. That's fantastic.
So my whole bathroom is different because of Sean O'Mara. I have different deodorant. I have different soap, the stuff that you recommended. I have, which by the way works better than anything, even for washing your clothes.
Yeah.
Different toothpaste. I have black toothpaste now. It's like a no fluoride charcoal type of thing. I don't know if that's any good, but it certainly has none of the bad stuff in it, at least that I'm aware. Not the same sense, not fluoride, no mouthwash like that.
Yeah.
Why am I doing this again?
Yeah.
Seems to be healthy, but why?
Yeah. So it's interesting. A lot of studies have looked at the influence within minutes of utilizing something innocuously and very commonplace like mouthwash. That blood pressure is noted to increase within about 15 minutes of using a mouthwash product. So the mechanism to understand and explain why that happened was identified. And what it is you have an oral microbiome in addition to a microbiome within your gastrointestinal tract, your gut microbe, and your microbiome on your body. You have an oral microbiome within your oral pharynx. And when you take mouthwash, you kill the particular type of bacteria that are responsible for the conversion of dietary nitrites and nitrates into nitric oxide. And nitric oxide is this incredibly important biological product that your body makes that's responsible for your cardiovascular system, i.e. your blood pressure. So taking a mouthwash is harmful to these delicate microbes. And that's just one mechanism, Dave. That there are many other probably unidentified pathways of influence that chemicals come in and disrupt our beautiful biology that God designed for us to benefit from. And so when you eliminate mouthwash, you can start developing good microbes. And an alternative to it might sound kind of funny, but if you just cut out processed foods and eliminate carbohydrates, your malodorous bad microbes that create bad odor within your mouth, also go away when you start eating meat and fat. And then when you contribute beneficially, positively to your body by eating fermented foods, it gets rid of bad microbes and helps you have good microbes so your breath is fresher and you don't have bad odors.
You made this point that you said you'll notice a couple, and I want to rephrase this to you because you can correct me in maybe my misinterpretation, but I remember it was this, more or less, when a person sneezes, we all know as human beings, we're like, oh, or when they're passing gas or they're belching or they're bad breath or BO, we want to get away from that.
Yeah.
That's a microbe type of a thing, right?
Yeah.
Microbiome thing. Yeah. Our body is unconsciously telling us this is unhealthy, I need to move from it. And it's disease.
Yeah.
And then when you go to this sort of diet, you actually start to, so hey, women who want their men to get rid of all these bad things, just put them on this diet and you're going to be a little bit better off.
Absolutely. It will definitely improve their quality of life and their husband's quality of life through extension. If you get your husband more healthy, it's going to improve you.
So those are signs of not being healthy.
Absolutely. And so, passing gas. And a big sign I like to tell people is you start passing gas when you're urinating. Mm-hmm. And you're losing your rectal tone and your colonic tone, the tone of your gastrointestinal tract is deteriorating. And also the change in your stool. There's a stool chart that you can look at. These are the things that physicians have to be trained in, called the Bristol stool chart, BRISTOL, the Bristol stool chart, shows you the type of stool, the shape of your stool. And the optimized biologically healthy man or woman has a type 4 stool. Kids have these. And so when they're absent disease, you have these perfectly shaped stools with tapers on the end. They look like bananas, tapered in the end, with a very smooth surface. And so a reflection of your health is how you defecate and how you urinate. So passing a lot of gas, a lot of bad odor, taking a long time to have a bowel movement, and the shape of your stool are all metrics by which your health is reflected. So it's really an important bit of information to be aware of. And the other interesting thing, you have raised, how many kids do you have, Dave? 5 or 6? I
have 6 and now blessed with 3 more.
Yeah.
Beautiful stepdaughters.
All right. So if you toilet train them and daddy says, okay, now, they would go to the bathroom, have a bowel movement. Now daddy says to wipe, and you would help them wipe their little bottom. There wouldn't be anything on the toilet paper. Do you remember that? Mm-hmm. And the reason is their bodies are so healthy, there's no residual stool. Animals in the wild are so healthy, there's no residual stool. Adults need toilet paper because residual stool on the outside of the anus is nothing more than a reflection of declining health from disease. And so what happens to clients that work with me is that they gradually get away and don't need to wipe anymore because their gastrointestinal tract works so well, it returns to a more youthful state like a 3-year-old, and you don't need toilet paper. And you get these beautiful shaped stools that are tapered in each end. A bowel movement is only about 3 to 7 seconds. There's no bad odor. There's no flatus. There's no noise. And it's like a reflex, and it feels fantastic. If you see babies when they have bowel movements, they get these beautiful smiles on their faces because it feels so good.
I didn't think we'd ever go here in this conversation.
But today you see old, humans are grunting, and it's like anything. Oh my God, constipation, it's pain, and it's a disaster. So you go from this healthy baby to this very diseased state.
That's fantastic. So kind of staying in the practical, because we've been going for quite some time, which is amazing. And we could keep going. In fact, we're going to. We're gonna fill the Dragon Slayer Theater here with people who we are going to put on the full-on life influence. I mean, imagine, when we're done with people, if they wanted to build a business and they couldn't, we're going to show them how to do it. We're going to show them how to be more influential. If they wanted the pay raise and they weren't getting it, they weren't getting the promotion, they're going to get that. If they want to sell more, they're going to sell more. If they can't attract the woman or man of their dreams, that's going to happen. We're going to show them how all of this intermingles.
Awesome.
Yeah, it happens through great health, but it also happens through living a virtuous life, getting rid of vice, adding virtue to it. And by the way, if getting rid of carbs is one of the ways to do that, we're going to show them how.
Yeah.
But one last thing on this particular topic that I just want to hit is fasting.
Yeah.
This is something that you're very reasonable about when you started. When I told you, like, I don't fast and I eat like 6 meals a day, small meals, no fat. But you try to give me, like, all I had was a filet mignon. I thought I was amazing. Now somebody's like, you want a filet? I'm like, do I have to eat that? Like the worst piece of meat? Can't I have a ribeye? Which is my favorite now.
Go-to, yeah.
So all grass-fed, grass-finished, by the way. But you said wisely, good counsel, don't try to do a 3-day fast, a 72-hour fast right away. Build your fasting muscle. And I've been able to build a fasting muscle. And the hardest part of a fast for me is, well, there's 2 things that happen. One is whenever I set my target and I get close to it, I get really hungry. It's like if I set a 24-hour fast, I'm at like 23 hours. I'm like, I gotta eat.
Yeah.
But if I set it at 48-hour fast, I don't even think about it at 24. Although I will tell you though that it is that 24-hour mark that is the hardest for me, where I think a little bit more about food. But if I just let myself, so let's say I eat at 3 or 4 or 5, the next day I get to 3 or 4 or 5, I'm like, I gotta eat. I gotta do something to distract myself, get away from it, and then fall asleep. When I wake up the next morning, I don't need to eat, and I'm fine. And I'm like, here I'm like almost 48 hours not eating, and I have the best workout. I run fast, I lift weights, I'm ultra focused at work.
Yeah.
And you told me about that, and I was like, that can't be true.
Yeah.
I knew it was, but I finally got there, and I enjoy it. But what does this do? What is the fasting actually accomplishing? How often do we do it? I think you talked about autophagy and how when your body reaches autophagy, after a certain point, it kills cancer cells if they're not at least at like a stage 4 level, or there's like there's a point of diminishing return on fasting for cancer patients, but there's health for others, and that actually even builds immunity. Talk more about that.
Yeah, so you're correct in the process and the state, the biological state that fasting brings the most benefit is through autophagy. And it's one of those A words besides adiponectin that I hope people watching this show will bother to research and learn more about. So it's one thing to hear a expert or somebody come in and give their opinion. It's another thing to have it corroborated through self-study. So hopefully people listening today say, well, Dave and Sean were talking about autophagy. Let me look into that. That's what happens when you fast. And briefly, what happens when autophagy is setting in. And by the way, from studies, it is dose dependent, and it increases maximally at about 3 days, about 72 hours. So as you continue to fast, starting off early, you get some benefits with autophagy, but the benefits increase, the levels of the activity of autophagy increases till about 72 hours or 96 hours. And then it kind of levels off and maybe starts to go down a little bit.
So can you get into autophagy after 24 hours?
Yep, you can. So after 24 hours, if you've been fasting for 24 hours, it will continue to improve. And what's happening with autophagy, just so people in the audience have never heard of it and don't know what it is it's your body's the best way to describe it is spring cleaning in a house. So it's where cellular debris and disease starts to abate, starts to go away. The body starts cleaning things out and you start improving. And so that's why you feel better when you're in a fasted state. Your body is reset to a higher, more better, optimal state. And by the way, if you think about it from an ancestral standpoint, our ancestors would not have hunted with a full belly. They would have hunted in a fasted state where they're hungry, they're going out to hunt, and it wouldn't make sense to be in a weakened state if you're going to hunt. And so what happens over a period of time, and you've experienced this, as you correctly say, you want to get fasting muscle, you want to acquire the capacity to fast, you actually will improve better. And that's why you're faster, you're stronger, you're more clear thinking. You process information better. I mean, one of the first experiences I had with this was going to watch my son that I had seen play hockey for years. I went once in a state of fasting for about 72 hours, and my ability to follow that hockey puck and to analyze the shots and what was happening were so far superior than what I could do in a fed state that I realized what an advantage this would provide if I had to go out and hunt and do things. So since that, it's been probably 8 years past that, I regularly exploit fasting when I really have to perform. So I would offer, as enticement to any professionals listening today, to encourage them to try out fasting and do it over a slow period of time and watch how their body improves, and with it, their performance will improve. They'll just become better. They'll set new personal best records. They'll make less errors at work. They'll process the same work that they normally do much more efficiently. And that's why you're beginning to really fall in love with it. But Dave, you're still early into this, brother. You've only been doing it for 1 year. The best is yet to come. And I have been doing extended fasting now for almost 7 years. And I continue to fast longer and have even better benefit than I ever have after 7 years of doing this. So there doesn't seem to be an end in sight to this, and I intend to continue to exploit fasting.
I also notice I don't really lose muscle or anything when I fast. I would have thought for sure I would lose muscle.
Yeah,
and
a lot of people think that, and I'm glad you bring that up because they're afraid to fast. But one of the things that I encourage you to do is to exercise in a fasted state.
Yeah,
So prisoners of war, POWs, are emaciated, they lose muscle because they're not exercising, they're stressed out, and they're caloric deprived. They're basically in a fasted state. But you won't lose that muscle if you exercise like our ancestors would. They'd go out hunt, and they would also, by the way, engage in conflict. So if they had neighboring tribes that they were competing with, God forbid they had to, then they would do so in a fasted state because they would perform better. And so when you exercise, you want to exercise in a fasted state, not in a fed state. Your blood is in a fed state going to your mesenteric arteries, your gastrointestinal system to help with digestion. It's not available to go to your muscles in your periphery. But when you're in a fasted state, then the blood, there's no food in your stomach, and the blood can then be diverted very efficiently to your muscles for performance. So that's why you really perform better, and the athletes in the future will always perform professional games, compete in fasted states. They just don't know about it yet.
Yeah.
But the NFL, forward thinking, the best soccer, football in Europe, they're going to find out about fasting, and those entire teams will be competing in fasting states. You watch, that's going to happen.
I remember there was a Muslim pro football player. I can't remember who it was, a few years ago during Ramadan, would do these really super long fasts and perform at a super high level. And I was mystified by how he did that.
I wish you see if you can remember who it was.
Yeah, we can look that up too.
Circle back with them.
So another thing, just to wrap this up, I've changed my workouts a little bit too now. So my workouts are like a fist fight. So I still do like back and buys one day and then shoulders and chest. But I will do, gosh, how many sets will I do? I don't know. I'll do like 25 sets of 10 to 15 reps in 30 minutes.
Awesome.
And I walk out of there and I feel like I've got the energy to do the workout. It's not that difficult to do. And now 20 minutes after I leave, I am made aware, just by way of this relaxation, that I had a great workout.
Yeah.
And I'm done.
Yep.
And so it's efficient too. I mean, it doesn't, what's also great? Like I save so much time not eating on Fridays.
Yeah.
Like I don't have to make the meals. We don't go through that process. I only eat once on Wednesdays. It's less. I only eat 2 meals instead of 3.
Shopping's so much more easier than before.
Easy. We know what we're going to get. And it's bonding for my wife and I. We enjoy this. And, she knew about Carnivore before I ever did. And the workouts are shorter. And instead of doing like 30 or 40 minute runs.
Perfect for business executives.
Oh my gosh, I spent about 2 minutes on cardio, and it's not cardio, but I spent 2 minutes running. I'm like, I'm going to go for my workout. Back. I don't know how long. I only wait maybe 5 to 8 seconds between sprints. How long should I wait?
I mix it up. That's a question I get. A lot of people want to know how long you should wait. Nature would cause us to sprint, sometimes back to back because, we had conflict, we had hunting, we were going back and forth. And sometimes we just sprint one time and we wouldn't sprint again for, a week. So it changes. Variability is important. And so sometimes I on average, I tell people to sprint about 6 times every other day, and you can mix it up how long you want to wait between those 6 sprints.
Okay.
And just make sure you bring variety to that.
Okay.
And same thing with your workouts, mix it up. But I love that you liken your exercise routine to fist fights, because basically when it came down to it, the 2 parameters that are sympathomimetic, engaging the fight or flight thing, are flight, how fast we ran, and fight, fighting. Mm-hmm. And so those were really the 2 traits, the exercise, that kept a human being in the gene pool the longest, and also dictated how well they were going to thrive. Yeah. And that's what the business community is interested, I hope, in doing. Thriving, you want to be successful. Well, we need to thrive biologically. So fist fights, that kind of an exercise, I don't encourage my clients to go out to a bar and get in a fist fight, but exercise in the manner that you have astutely figured out on your own is the way to do it. So condense, maximally intensive in a short period of time. 15 to 30 minutes is great, and you save all this time where you previously were going to maybe jog for a long time or going to work out in a gym for an hour or 2. It's much more efficient. So my executive clients or business owners telling you have saved me, Sean, so much time in this lifestyle. And oh, by the way, how much better I feel and how much better I'm living. Yeah. This is just, the dividends are fantastic.
So one of the last things that I did too to get myself to where I needed to go, and I think this is useful to a lot of people who maybe are in the pain that I was in, is I took a very close look at how I walk. And I still go back to it. Even now, I'm not entirely out of the woods on things. And I need to talk to you about just kind of being a little bit, my spine a little being off because of things that have happened in the past that I need to overcome, including like an accident that I was in and stuff. So you hurt this knee, and so you limp on this side, and that makes your calf a little smaller over here, and this one is a little bigger, which puts a little strain on this muscle here, which makes you strain your calf, which makes you limp forever, and the hip hurts more there. And I knew that when I started trying to run, by the way, I started with you last March, I think it was, and it wasn't until September when I could sprint. So I had to try it, and I'd sprint for, and I saw this is what got most of the people out of the game. This is why I know they need our help. They'd sprint 50 yards. A 35-year-old guy that I'm talking to, you should do this, And he's seemingly in good shape. He goes, I pulled my hamstring, I'm never going to do it again. Everybody always says that, And I'm like, okay, well, for me, just I couldn't even walk. I went 40 yards. I couldn't walk. Then I got a little bit better. I tried it again. I went 30 yards, and it hurt. But I said, I'm just going to do this. I remember in July, my Achilles was so bad from trying the sprint. And I said, okay, I'm going to do this thing called perfect walking. I started it before that, where I'm going to think about every stride I make so I don't walk out this way a little bit. I don't gait this way. Yeah. I don't just like pull my leg, but I have an even stride. So I'm using my hip flexors equal to this, equal to that. And I just kept finding more errors in what I was doing. And the pain would show up more when I started doing it right. And over a period of time, I went from being able to perfect walk to say, I'm going to park my car 40 yards away from the store, and I'm going to just jog in and hope tomorrow I can get out of bed. And then I could park it 50 yards away, and then a little bit more. And I will never forget the first time I ran in September, and the following day, I got up to go get a glass of water, and when I walked, I limped. And then I said, why am I limping? I don't feel any pain. And it was a habitual limp with no pain. And so I walked normal. And I continued to walk normal. And now I have no limp and no pain. But I still find myself, when I am tired, I limp, even though I don't have pain.
It's just kind of a habit that you settle down into.
Yeah.
What's really interesting to me about you, Dave Durand, is that you are intensely analytical, and you purpose to walk this perfect walking. But you paid so much attention to what you were doing. And I've been doing this a long time, 15 years working with people who want to optimize, become better biological versions of themselves. And that right there, what you said, is a trait that strongly predicts very good results. So in a short period of time, 1 year, I'm beginning to rethink my prediction that it would be 2 years before you'd eliminate your visceral fat, because you have brought to bear a practice that you probably had cultivated in the business world of analyzing how people can perform and lead better in the business setting, and now you're using it in the biological setting, you get better results. And I try to sniff that out in clients, as opposed to the man or woman that just doesn't pay attention to things. And so there are certain traits that suggest that people are going to have better experiences and better results in trying to get healthy as there are with anything that you might be improving. But that is, it gives me a really warm feeling. It endears me to you. It makes me want to hang with Dave Durand. It makes me want to
we're going to help a lot of people.
Time.
We're going to help a lot of people together. So I would say too, frankly speaking, because I feel so good, I just have trust that whatever time it takes for the visceral fat to go away. So we're going to do my scans. We're going to find out.
Yeah, let's find out.
Did I improve at all? Am I 20% better? Yeah. Am I 50%? I don't know. I know that any improvement is improvement. And since this is a lifestyle that I'm choosing, I'm always in a hurry. But I'm not really in, really great professionals are patient in all things, or excuse me, they're patient in all things, but they wait for nothing.
Yeah.
And that's what I know this is. And because I'm not done, I'm just going to do this for life. I'm okay if I'm only 20% there, because 2 years from now, I'm going to be all the way there.
Exactly.
And so, but I'm looking forward to seeing the scans, and we'll see where it is, and we'll continue to go. Well, I got to tell you, absolute pleasure. How can people get a hold of you? What can we share?
Well, my website, if you want to look me up, it's just my name, DrSeanomara.com, DrSeanomara.com. And you can find me also at Dr. Sean O'Mara on Instagram, YouTube, X, LinkedIn. I use that handle on all my socials, and also I have another Instagram account called Alpha Bod, where I'm working with people and helping them get rid of visceral fat. They can't afford to do an MRI, so that's kind of a new initiative that I have going. But yeah, it's been a pleasure to come and thank you for being on social media. Social media is providing this great, venue for good information to get out that the system doesn't want to get out. So really appreciate your time and inviting me to come on your show again.
It's great to be with you. And by the way, we did get the name of that football player, so we're going to give that before we leave, and you might want to take a look at that as another example.
Yeah, that's awesome.
All right. Thanks so much, Sean.
Hey, Dave. Super excited to be able to do this report for you. You crushed it, man. You crushed it. I'm so excited for you. So let's do this. I'm going to explain why you crushed it and why you're so awesome. I knew I had you pegged right. You're a total alpha. So yeah, you didn't fool around, man. You didn't fool around. All right, so here you are back. Got this reversed. This is March 2024. By convention, we put the scans, the old scans on the bottom and the latest scans on the top. So this doesn't show up very good, so I'm going to switch. This is your most recent scan, so March of 2025. So 1 year time difference, and we're at the level of your chest and your heart. Okay, so we're going to look initially at your heart, and it's right in the middle of your left lung and your right lung. So we're going to take a look at that. So here you are laying on your back, first scan on your back. This is your right lung, your left lung. In the middle of your lung is your heart. And this is your aorta, okay? Your aorta is the largest artery in your body. And the first thing we can notice is you got a lot of white stuff around your aorta. That white stuff in there. And substantial. But look how much you've eliminated that white stuff. So the inflammatory fat surrounds your aorta, and it starts to weaken the walls, and it causes dilation of the artery, and you can get an aneurysm, a downward aortic aneurysm, which kills people if it goes undetected, and oftentimes it does, and then suddenly ruptures, and you'll bleed to death before you could ever get to the hospital. In fact, it can rupture in the ER, and you're a dead man. We can't save you. So that's how fast you go. But here's your heart and all this white stuff. And remember, on an MRI scan, fat shows up as white. So you got all that fat surrounding your heart. And that is deadly inflammatory fat. And it causes dysrhythmias. A big popular one it causes is atrial fibrillation. And it will cause a heart attack. And we'll explain why that happens. But in your case, a substantial amount of fat around your heart when you originally came, and look how much dramatically it's been eliminated. You really significantly reduced it. And at the same time, we see consistently improvements, because see all your muscle here is dark. You see all that white stuff in your muscle? That is myosteatosis. That's human marbleization of Dave Durand. Okay, your muscles were marbleized when you came to me, falling apart. Then you got your act together, and look how much you dramatically eliminated that fat in your muscle. So when I walked in that facility, and down in Naples, your studio, and I saw you, I was like, God, that man has changed his body. You just went from, kind of an average looking person to you look like you're ready to go back fighting. Yeah, you had, and I'm like, we're going to see it on the MRI. So outside, legit, impressive. Inside, legit, impressive. Look how much you eliminated that fat in your muscle and fat around your heart. That heart is going to be performing way better. So let's look at this diagram to understand why. This is a heart that is healthy, doesn't have fat coating it. These are the arteries that provide blood flow to your heart. Your cardiac output is provided by that blood going to the muscle the muscle of the heart so it can beat. And this is a heart with a lot more fat over the surface of it, and this is what happens. But what I want to point out is these arteries are on the outside of the heart, and they're up against all that inflammatory fat. And that's why it causes a heart attack, because it's by extension. And these arteries, this is the surface that get exposed to on the outside of that artery. Okay, and then the inflammatory substances that get released by that fat, interleukin 1, interleukin 6, interleukin 18, tumor necrosis factor, alpha, resistant, all these hosts of adipokines, chemokines, cytokines get released, and they cause disease and infiltration of the smooth muscle inside your artery, and it causes endothelial dysfunction. The endothelial sites right there, endotheliocytes are the cells of the endothelium, and it causes them to be dysfunctional and leads to platelet aggregation, a blood clot, and you have a heart attack. And it could kill you, or you might survive a heart attack depending on how big it is. So here's a heart with just a small amount of fat around it. Probably somebody in their teens or maybe early 20s. And this is heart, probably somebody in the late 20s or 30s, early 30s. You can see propagation of that fat is accumulating, but still the majority of the surface of that heart is still patent and free. But by the time somebody is your age in their 50s, that heart is completely surrounded by that fat. And that was really your case when you came. It's all the way around your heart, that big chunk of fat encasing your heart. And you took care of the job, man. You got rid of that fat. So that was awesome that you had such a significant change. So here's what I recently learned. You're the first video I'm going to be able to share this with. I went on in AI and I asked this question. Is there a single case of a human being anywhere in the world in the history of humanity, and any study, any case report, any autopsy, that had a heart attack that did not have also this fat? And do you know what it said? No. No. So if you don't have any heart fat, you're not going to have a heart attack. No heart fat, no heart attack. It's that simple. So you've done good. You've almost completely eliminated that fat. I want more of it to go, but it is that profound. I'm prepared to go on social media, mainstream media, and professionally opine my opinion that it is impossible to have a heart attack without that heart fat. If you don't have heart fat, that inflammatory fat around your heart up against your arteries, you will not have a heart attack. I mean, we can't find a single case in the history of the world. So this is your target. It's not cholesterol. You're going to work to eliminate that and be as aggressive as you have been so far with the strategies, and even more so. Okay, now you know they work. Okay, and you know what's happened between when you came to see me in March of 2024 and you couldn't sprint, you were getting ready to have 4 joints replaced, and look how you feel now. And this is evidencing how you changed on the inside. So here you are, your MRI scan, your abdomen. This is your stomach. You're laying on your back. These are your back muscles, and we can see all the fat, big streaks of fat, and how that was dramatically eliminated. And all this weight stuff, you've dramatically eliminated your visceral fat. I would say you've reduced your visceral fat by about 80%, 80 to 85%, substantial elimination of that visceral fat. So super happy about your performance there, and you still have some residual amount of visceral fat, but significantly better. And the other thing I want to point out is, do you see that visceral fat is mounding, pointing up here? It's starting to dissect your abdomen, and how you've eliminated that, and your belly was sticking out. Now, dude, stud muffin, you got a flat abdomen, okay? See how flat that is? Before, it was pooging up when you were laying down, pooging up, because that visceral fat was pushing up like a volcano. And we'll see that in a little better view right here, okay? So when we look at that, all that white stuff, look how much you dramatically remove that white stuff. And do you see the volcano? You see that? It looks just like a volcano. Gone. And what you were heading towards, I don't think I told you about it, is a hernia. You would have had a hernia, and you would have had what's called diathesis recti, where you get this big ridge on your abdomen when you come up. Old men get these ridges when they come up to do a sit-up, because that visceral fat has eroded their anterior structures of their abdomen, and they get that, and they end up having surgery. But the answer is, you don't need surgery if you get rid of your visceral fat like Dave Durand did. So dramatic reduction in your visceral fat, reduction in your fat of your muscles. But dude, check this out. You ready for this? So do you see your muscles here? Look at the same level of your belly button, right there. The same level, those same muscles. You grew them, man. You grew your muscles at your age in your 50s. You're getting jacked. You know it's happening, but we're seeing it on this MRI. And it would not have happened in that dramatic of fashion. You would never have put on that kind of muscle had you not got rid of that visceral fat. That visceral fat impairs your ability to put on muscle. What's going to happen to Dave Durand? You're going to start working out. You're going to get a big pump, just like you did when you were in your 20s and when you were fighting. I don't know what age you were when you were fighting, but when you work out and you're healthy, you produce nitric oxide and you get a pump. And that's going to start happening to you again. And it happens to me, and I am in my 60s. So I'm super excited that I get that pump and I work out, because I got no visceral fat. So tremendous elimination, at least 80% of your visceral fat gone. Eliminated that mound, diathesis recti, your growing muscle. This is a solid A performance. Solid A. I'm just so excited, so happy for you. And let's look at slightly lower now. We're going down. These are kind of towards your hip bones. We're lower in your pelvis. And you got a huge amount of visceral fat when you came to me in March 24. And look at the dramatic reduction of that fat within your pelvis. Super happy about it, and how you substantially have eliminated the fat that you had in your recti spinae muscles, your back. So had you not come to me, your back would have gotten weaker and weaker, and you'd have been bent over as an older guy. Hi, my name is Dave Durand, and I'm going to help you be awesome. Okay. So we're going to prevent that from happening. You're going to do it by just continuing on what you're doing, the strategies. All right. This is now into your pelvis. This is your bladder. And right there is your rectum. Okay, right there. And all that white stuff is visceral fat around it, and how much you dramatically have removed that white stuff. And now we just see a healthy puborectalis muscle, just your basically it's your anatomical anal canal, and that's going to preserve that functionality. So Dave Durand never needs diapers. Okay, we're just going to the anti-diaper plan for Dave Durand is keep targeting that stuff, make it go away. So when you're 120, oh no, I don't need any diapers. I'm fine. I got myself under control. You're not going to be passing gas doing yoga or exerting yourself or sneezing or laughing. That ain't going to happen, because you're going to have a puborectalis muscle that could crack walnuts because it's so healthy, because it hasn't gotten inflamed and diseased like everybody else. Grandma and grandpa get up off the couch and spontaneously pass gas. Not going to happen to Dave Durand, okay? So awesome how much you improved there. And super excited. These are your glutes, okay? Gluteus maximus. You don't have as much of that fat that you had lining before. So Dave Durand's getting some powerful glutes back, and you must be squatting or sprinting, and those muscles are coming back, and you're getting rid of that inflammatory fat. So let's look at the last scan, okay? Your legs, okay? Ready, brother? Here are your legs and all that white stuff, okay? I remember discussing this with you when you came to Minneapolis, and you've had, marbleization of your legs. Wow. Look how much you've removed that marbleization, okay? All those sprints you're doing, all the working out, following the strategies, look at it and behold the optimization of Dave Durand, okay? The MRI does not lie. In your case, you are definitely optimizing. This is 1 year and you're a young man. You're not even halfway through your life. Your best years are ahead of you. You got this. You've proven that this is working for yourself, how you feel, and now you've proven it medically through these diagnostic images. This ain't placebo effect. You are legitimately erasing disease in your body. So I couldn't be happier for you. I'm super excited, and I look forward to continuing to work with you and just make you the best biological version of yourself that you can possibly be. All right, Dave, God bless you, man.